After years of visiting his mother in prison, young Danny's world is shattered when she mysteriously disappears without a trace. Growing up in foster care, he never stops searching for answers. At 18, a shocking discovery reveals that his mother may have been framed by a powerful family hiding dark secrets. As Danny risks everything to uncover the truth, he finds himself face to face with the ruthless Davenports. Can he expose the lies that stole his mother's life? And will they finally be reunited? Or is he walking into a trap? Young Danny sat quietly in the waiting room of Marwood State Prison, his tiny legs swinging nervously beneath the metal chair. Every Sunday, without fail, his foster father drove him to this cold, echoing building to see his mom. But today, a strange silence filled the room, and the guard he knew so well avoided his gaze. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "Where's my mom?" Danny asked, his voice just above a whisper, his hands clenching a small, wilting daisy he had picked on the way there. The guard shifted uncomfortably, fidgeting with the ring of keys on his belt, a bead of sweat trickling down his brow. "She's, moved," he said after a long pause. "They transferred her to a different facility. But don't worry, kid. She's fine." The words sounded hollow, even to Danny, whose young heart raced with confusion and fear. "Moved?" Danny echoed, but the guard was already ushering him out, closing the door and his questions behind him. Danny's foster father tried to distract him on the drive home, talking about the diner and his plans to repair the squeaky front porch, but Danny's mind was miles away. In the days and weeks that followed, he tried asking everyone he could, foster care workers, teachers, anyone who might know. But no one had answers, and his mother seemed to have vanished entirely. Danny clung to memories of his mother. Her laughter, her soft hands holding his, the way she would call him "my little man" when she tucked him in bed. Each Sunday became a bitter reminder of her absence, each passing month weighing on his young heart, leaving him to wonder if he'd ever see her again. Time moved slowly, and with each year, Danny grew a little taller, his face carrying the shadows of unanswered questions. He knew little about why his mother had been taken from him, only that she had always whispered in his ear, "Danny, no matter what they say, I didn't do it." Those words stayed with him, woven into his heart. By age 18, Danny had become a young man with a lean build and piercing brown eyes that held a spark of determination. He had left foster care and found work at a local mechanic's garage. The work was hard and the days were long, but he took every shift he could. One night, as he closed up shop, an older woman with sharp eyes approached him. She was searching for someone, she said, and his heart skipped a beat when she mentioned his mother's name. Danny's heart pounded as he stared at the woman, his mother's name still ringing in his ears. She was dressed neatly in a dark blazer, her eyes piercing yet warm. Introducing herself as Ms. Grayson, she explained that she was a private investigator. Her client, a former friend of Lisa's, had hired her to learn more about Lisa's case. "I don't have all the answers yet, Danny," she said, her voice softening, "but I thought you might want to know what I found." For years, Danny had believed his mother was either still imprisoned or, well, he didn't let his mind wander to darker places. But Ms. Grayson's arrival cracked open a door he thought had long been shut. "Do you know where she is?" he asked, feeling a desperate hope, a feeling that hadn't stirred in him since he was a boy. Ms. Grayson hesitated, her gaze lowering. "I can't say for certain, but I think someone made her disappear, quietly, and I believe it was because she was innocent." Danny felt a chill run down his spine. He remembered his mother's voice whispering, "I didn't do it." All those years, her words had clung to his memory. Now, Ms. Grayson's revelation ignited something fierce in him, a need for truth. As they spoke, Ms. Grayson laid out what she'd uncovered. Danny's mother, Lisa, had worked for a prominent family, the Davenports, who owned several businesses in town. Lisa was a trusted employee until one day, a substantial amount of money disappeared from the company account. Suspicion fell on her swiftly, despite her loyal service. But Ms. Grayson's digging had uncovered that a cousin of the Davenports, someone with a shadowy history, might have been involved in the scheme. This person had connections and influence, and it seemed like covering the crime required Lisa to take the fall. Danny's fists clenched as he absorbed each detail, the injustice settling like a stone in his chest. So they just let her rot in prison? And now she's gone? His voice cracked, a mix of anger and despair. Ms. Grayson reached out a hand, as if to steady him. "Danny, we're going to get to the bottom of this. I believe your mother was released quietly to keep this all hidden. And if she's still out there, I think she's being watched or controlled somehow. But I can't do this alone. I need your help." In the weeks that followed, Danny and Ms. Grayson worked side by side. Their investigation took them through old courthouse records, dusty archives, and late-night stakeouts. Danny was relentless, fueled by years of unanswered questions. Each new discovery painted a darker picture of the Davenports' corruption and the lengths they would go to protect their reputation. One night, as Danny reviewed a stack of documents, he came across an old newspaper clipping. The article showed a photo of a young Lisa outside the courthouse on the day of her sentencing, clutching his tiny hand. He was stunned by the sight of himself, his face tear-streaked, his eyes wide with confusion and sadness. Beneath the photo, a headline read, "Former Davenport employee sentenced. Family of wealth and integrity shocked by betrayal." It was a knife to his heart. The family who had condemned his mother had built their reputation on the lie that she was a criminal. But just as Danny felt he might be close to unraveling the truth, Ms. Grayson pulled him aside, a strange look on her face. "Danny, I got a call this morning," she said quietly. "A man claiming to know about your mother's whereabouts wants to meet us. Tonight. He wouldn't give his name, but he says he has something that belongs to her." Danny's heart raced. This was the break they needed, or it could be a trap, but he knew he couldn't back down now, not when they were so close. Later that evening, Danny and Ms. Grayson found themselves in an empty park. The only sounds the distant hum of traffic and the rustling of trees in the night breeze. They waited in tense silence until a figure appeared out of the shadows, a tall, wiry man in his late 40s, with a face worn by worry and years. He held a small, battered leather book in his hands. "Are you Danny?" the man asked, his voice hoarse. Danny nodded, his eyes fixed on the book. The man glanced around nervously before speaking. "Your mom, she didn't deserve what happened. The Davenports, they ruined her life." He held out the book. "She gave me this to keep safe. She said you'd need it one day." Danny's hands shook as he reached for the book, running his fingers over the familiar, worn cover. It was his mother's journal, one she had always kept close, writing in it each night. The man looked at him, his eyes shadowed by regret. "I was supposed to keep it hidden, but I couldn't ignore my conscience anymore." Back at Ms. Grayson's office, Danny and Ms. Grayson opened the journal, each page revealing the truth his mother had kept hidden for so long. Page after page, Lisa's handwriting detailed her innocence, her fears, and finally the chilling revelation that she believed someone was watching her, keeping tabs on her every move. The last entry was dated shortly before her transfer, and her words shook Danny to his core. "They're planning something. If anything happens to me, tell Danny to keep fighting." Danny felt a wave of fury and determination surge through him. His mother had known they might silence her. She had left these words for him, trusting that he would one day uncover the truth. He clenched his fists, his jaw set. No matter how long it took, he would find the people responsible and finally bring his mother the justice she deserved. But as he turned to Ms. Grayson, a sense of dread settled over him. There were still powerful people in town who wouldn't want the truth exposed, and he had no idea how far they might go to keep their secrets buried. Their next move was clear. They needed to confront the Davenports. It was risky, but Danny couldn't afford to hesitate. With Ms. Grayson's guidance, they arranged a meeting with one of the Davenports, hoping to catch him off guard and reveal what they knew. When they arrived, however, it was clear the family had anticipated them. They were ushered into a darkened room where the youngest Davenport, Richard, stood waiting. He was smooth, almost charming, but Danny could see the thinly veiled malice in his eyes. "So," Richard said with a smirk, "you've been digging around where you don't belong. I'd advise you both to stop now, before you regret it." Danny felt a cold anger rise. "You ruined my mother's life, and you think I'll just back down?" Richard's smirk grew darker. "You have no idea what you're up against, boy. People who cross us don't tend to fare well." But Danny stood firm. For the first time, he felt truly ready to face whatever lay ahead, even if it meant taking on the powerful family that had destroyed his mother's life. The following night, Danny and Ms. Grayson sat in the dimly lit confines of her office, exhausted but undeterred. Richard Davenport's veiled threat had only solidified their resolve. The truth was out there, hidden in layers of lies and influence. But now they had one last thread to pull. A source close to the Davenports who might be willing to expose their secrets. As they sifted through documents, Ms. Grayson glanced at her phone. "Danny, remember the man who gave us your mother's journal?" she whispered, her voice tight with urgency. "He mentioned someone who helped him hide certain records. An old accountant, loyal to your mother. I just tracked him down." They wasted no time, finding themselves later that night outside a modest house in the outskirts of town. Mr. Harvey, the accountant, was in his 70s, with a weary face and trembling hands. But his eyes shone with determination as he ushered them inside, pulling out stacks of papers he had kept hidden over the years. "Lisa was like a daughter to me," Mr. Harvey said, his voice thick with emotion. "They framed her to cover up their own crimes, and when she tried to defend herself, they made her disappear. I was a coward then, but not now." Danny and Ms. Grayson combed through the documents, their hearts pounding as piece after piece of the puzzle fell into place. Harvey's records detailed years of money laundering and fraudulent transactions orchestrated by the Davenports. It was the ammunition they needed to take down the family. But just as they were piecing together their plan, the sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet. In an instant, 3 men stormed the house, faces shadowed and expressions deadly. They weren't here to talk. Danny felt his heart race as one of them grabbed him, twisting his arm painfully behind his back. "Thought you could just dig around in our business and walk away?" One of the men sneered, his grip tightening. But before he could say more, a fierce shout rang out. "Ms. Grayson!" Wielding an old brass lamp, swung it straight into the man's head. He stumbled, releasing Danny, who staggered back as another man lunged forward, fists raised. A blur of chaos ensued. The men were rough, trained, and clearly under orders to keep the family's secrets safe. But Danny's anger surged, memories of his mother's life stolen, pushing him forward with a strength he didn't know he had. He fought back, fists flying as he dodged another blow. Ms. Grayson held her ground beside him, fierce and unyielding. Finally, sirens sounded in the distance, drawing closer. The attackers exchanged glances and, realizing their time was up, scrambled out the back door, disappearing into the night. Danny and Ms. Grayson stood in the wreckage of the room, panting, bruised but undefeated. The next day, they found themselves in a small, stuffy office at the police station. Detective Keller, a skeptical man in his 40s with piercing blue eyes, eyed them suspiciously as they presented the evidence they'd risked so much to gather. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen thoughtfully. "This is quite the story," he murmured. "But the Davenports have friends in high places. People who won't like this coming to light." Danny's heart sank. After everything, was the truth going to be buried yet again? But Ms. Grayson leaned forward, her voice hard as steel. "Detective, we have the documents, the witness statements, and now physical evidence from last night's attack. They didn't just threaten us, they assaulted us, trying to bury these crimes. Are you telling me that you're going to look the other way?" The detective's gaze softened, and he nodded slowly. "I'll look into it, but you both should watch your backs. These people don't let go easily." Danny nodded, determination hardening his resolve. They had come too far to turn back now. In the weeks that followed, Danny and Ms. Grayson took every precaution as they pushed forward, bringing their findings to the local news. The story gained traction, the town shocked by the layers of deceit and betrayal hidden behind the Davenport family's pristine reputation. Danny was inundated with memories of his mother, how she had kept her dignity even as they tore her life apart. He could only imagine the terror she must have felt, and it fueled his determination to see justice finally served. But then one night, just as Danny was about to leave Ms. Grayson's office, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. "If you want to see your mother again, meet me alone. No Ms. Grayson, no police." His blood ran cold. He glanced at Ms. Grayson, her face etched with worry, but he didn't need to speak. She could see the determination in his eyes. "Danny," she whispered, gripping his arm. "You can't go alone. It's too dangerous." He hesitated, torn, but the thought of his mother held captive, perhaps waiting for him, left him no choice. He nodded, gave her a faint smile, and left before she could protest further. The message had instructed him to go to an abandoned warehouse at the edge of town. The air was heavy with silence as he stepped inside, shadows stretching across the walls. The only sound was his heartbeat, thudding loud in his chest. A single light flickered in the far corner, illuminating a figure waiting for him. As he drew closer, his breath caught. It was Richard Davenport himself, a smug grin on his face, flanked by 2 guards. But Danny's focus was on the frail figure beside him, his mother. She looked older, worn down, but there was no mistaking her face. "Mom?" he whispered, tears stinging his eyes. Lisa's gaze met his, filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "Danny, you shouldn't have come." Richard smirked, gesturing casually to his guards. "Oh, I knew he'd come. Like mother, like son, both too stubborn for your own good." Danny's hands clenched, but he knew he had to stay calm. He glanced at his mother, a silent promise passing between them. Richard chuckled, enjoying their despair. "Here's the deal, Danny. Drop this investigation. Destroy any evidence you have, and you and your mother walk away. Refuse, and you'll both disappear for good." For a moment, Danny felt the weight of it all. The years of searching, the hope that had brought him to this moment. But then, he looked at his mother, saw the fight still flickering in her tired eyes, and he knew he couldn't give up. "You know what?" Danny said, his voice steady. "I'll never stop. Not until everyone knows what you did." A flicker of fear crossed Richard's face, but he masked it quickly, signaling to his guards. They moved toward Danny, but just then, the faint sound of police sirens reached their ears. Richard's eyes widened, his calm demeanor cracking. It was Ms. Grayson. She must have called the police when she realized where he'd gone. With a snarl, Richard grabbed Lisa, pulling her close as he whispered, "This isn't over." But before he could make another move, the doors burst open, and the police stormed in, weapons drawn. The guards scattered, and Richard was quickly overpowered. Danny rushed forward, catching his mother as she stumbled, her face pale but determined. In the chaos, Richard was handcuffed, the last of his control slipping through his fingers. "This town will never believe your lies," he spat, but his words held no power now. The truth was finally out. As Danny and his mother walked out of the warehouse, his arm wrapped protectively around her, he felt a wave of relief. After years of pain and loss, he finally had her back. Lisa leaned into him, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Danny. I never stopped believing you'd find me." And for the first time in years, he felt a peace he had thought lost forever. But he knew their journey wasn't over. There was still a trial, still battles to face. Yet now, for the first time, they would face it together. The courtroom was packed on the day the trial began, an air of anticipation and tension filling the space. Reporters lined the back walls, notepads and cameras ready to capture every detail. This was the trial the town had been waiting for. The story of the year. The Davenport family, once revered and untouchable, now sat on the defense bench, their smug confidence replaced by a nervous tension that even their expensive suits couldn't mask. Danny sat beside his mother, her hand trembling slightly in his. It had been months since the night at the warehouse, but the memories of it were still vivid. a reminder of how close they'd come to losing each other once again. Lisa was thinner, her face lined with years of hardship, but her spirit was unbroken. Today, she wore a calm determination that mirrored Danny's own. The prosecutor began by laying out the Davenports' long history of manipulation, theft, and deceit. Witness after witness took the stand, including Mr. Harvey, who detailed how the family had funneled money through hidden accounts and coerced employees to cover up their tracks. The evidence was undeniable, a mountain of proof built from the documents Danny and Ms. Grayson had so painstakingly gathered. Each piece chipped away at the Davenport family's reputation, exposing the depth of their lies. When the prosecutor called Lisa to the stand, Danny's heart raced. She stood, her steps slow but steady as she faced the judge and jury. Her voice was soft but firm as she recounted her story, the years of loyalty, the sudden betrayal, and the terror of being sent to prison for a crime she didn't commit. She spoke of her love for her son, the strength he had given her even in the darkest moments, and how she had clung to the hope that one day he would know the truth. The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words settling over everyone. Danny watched as jurors shifted, their expressions filled with empathy and outrage. Finally, Lisa turned to the Davenports, her eyes locking onto Richard's. "You tried to take everything from me," she said, her voice low but unyielding. "But you couldn't take my son. You couldn't break him." The defense's attempts to undermine her story were weak, faltering under the sheer force of the evidence against them. Richard Davenport's smug demeanor dissolved entirely when he took the stand, his evasions and lies crumbling under cross-examination. By the time the trial ended, there was little doubt left in anyone's mind. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned, finding Richard Davenport and his accomplices guilty on all charges: embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. As the judge announced the verdict, a ripple of relief passed through the courtroom. The Davenports' reign of fear and corruption was finally over. Outside the courthouse, Danny and Lisa stood together in the warm afternoon sunlight, a free future stretching before them. Reporters crowded around, eager for a statement, but Danny held up a hand, signaling them to wait. He turned to his mother, his eyes filled with gratitude and pride. "Mom," he said quietly, "it's over. It's finally over." Lisa smiled, her eyes glistening. "Thanks to you, Danny. You never gave up on me. Not once." She reached up, cupping his face with a gentle hand. "You're my hero." They walked away from the courthouse together, leaving behind the weight of the past. The town, once so eager to believe the worst about Lisa, now murmured in awe and sympathy, their glances filled with newfound respect. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a quiet rhythm for Danny and Lisa. They found a small house near the edge of town, surrounded by trees and open field. Lisa started working at a local flower shop, her hands finding comfort and peace in arranging blooms. Each flower a reminder of the life she was building anew. Danny continued his work at the mechanic's garage, finding a sense of purpose in simple, honest labor. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner, Lisa glanced up, a thoughtful look in her eyes. "Danny," she said softly, "there's something I'd like to do." "What's that?" he asked, curious. She smiled, reaching into her bag and pulling out her journal, the worn leather cover bringing a wave of memories. "I want to write it all down. The story, the truth, everything, for us. And maybe for others to know that hope and love can survive anything." Danny nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "I think that's a great idea, Mom. People need to know what you went through, and that you never gave up." In the following months, Lisa filled page after page, her words a testament to resilience and survival, each sentence a reminder of the strength she and Danny had found together. And through her writing, they both found healing, a way to put the past behind them and step forward, no longer haunted by the shadows of what had been lost. One day, as Danny finished a repair at the garage, a familiar face stepped through the door. Ms. Grayson, her sharp eyes softened by a warm smile. "Thought I'd stop by to check on you two," she said, giving Danny a friendly clap on the shoulder. "I see you're doing well." Danny grinned. "All thanks to you, Ms. Grayson. We couldn't have done this without your help." Ms. Grayson chuckled. Oh, don't give me too much credit. You and your mother are two of the strongest people I've ever known. She paused, a gleam in her eye. You know, if you ever get tired of fixing cars, you could come work for me. We could use someone with your kind of grit. Danny laughed, shaking his head. I think I'll stick with cars for now, but thank you for everything. As Ms. Grayson left, Danny looked out across the street, feeling the peace of an ordinary day. For the first time, he felt a sense of belonging, of having finally come home. His past might always be part of him, but it no longer defined him. He and his mother had carved out a new life, one built on resilience, hope, and the unbreakable bond they shared. As Danny and Lisa's story reminds us, love and resilience can overcome even the darkest trials. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to HeroKind Stories and share it with others who believe in the power of hope and family. And don't stop here. Click on the next video to dive into another story of courage and transformation. You won't want to miss it.